My name is Russell Carr. I'm Director for Design at Lotus Cars. And we're here today in Studio 2, one of our fantastic studios we have in this facility. Very quiet today because we're in the middle of coronavirus. So this environment, which would normally be teeming full of clay modelers, designers and digital modelers sitting over there, a lot of those people are working from home at the moment. But I'm going to be taking a little bit of time to walk you around this amazing car behind me, the Lotus Evija. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the design story of the Lotus Evija, but also take you through some of the amazing features on this vehicle. You can probably see around you some of the artifacts of the design process. So right at the back of the studio we've got a scale model hidden behind this display board. We've got prints of sketches that were generated. We've got image boards, and right next to us is actually the clay model which was used for the development of the vehicle. And as I said, this is the environment where the cars are developed, and we normally have designers working here and clay modelers, etc. When we start the process of any car, we always have to have some reason for doing it, a brief, some guidelines, etc. So when we started designing this car, it's a very simple brief from our CEO, our chairman, was to design a hypercar. And for Lotus, the objective obviously was to design a halo product that would cascade ideas and messaging onto all the new products that we're developing at the moment. Great starting point doing a hypercar. Obviously a hypercar is the best of the best. It's exceptional in all areas. And for us as designers, it really allows us to throw off all the shackles within design and really, explore amazing avenues. As someone put to me, it's like gloves coming off really. And for us as a design team, a lot of pent-up creative ideas that exploded out, and we were able to put them all into designing this car. But of course it's important we do it with a reason, and so first of all we start thinking about what we're trying to achieve. Well, we knew we were designing a hypercar, 2,000 horsepower, although at the start of the program we didn't know it was going to be quite that powerful, but we knew it was going to be the most powerful EV hypercar in the world. We knew it was the first hypercar for Lotus, we knew it was the first EV car for Lotus, and we knew it was going to be the first EV hypercar here in the UK. So there are many things there which are important, but of course we're also looking for things which are important to us as a brand. First off, from a design standpoint, we wanted to make the car beautiful. And that sounds very obvious, but it's very easy when you're doing something this extreme to get carried away and maybe design something that is more like a caricature, some sort of science fiction project. It's important that it's ingenious. Lotus is all about being clever, interpreting ideas in a different manner. The car has to be thrilling to look at. And of course, ultimately, people need to recognise it's a Lotus. So that will be some of the very obvious design cues which I'll talk you around. But it's also the philosophy behind the car. So Lotus has three quite important pillars behind the brand itself. One is all about efficiency of weight, one is all about efficiency in aerodynamics, and also driving dynamics on the car. So we as a design team, even though we are responsible for the aesthetics, we're constantly thinking, how can we express those characteristics in the design? How do we make it look agile, like it's a car that is going to be very dynamic? How do we make it look light? But also the way we shape the surfaces also does contribute to the performance in those areas. If we make the car compact, it's going to be lighter. And if we think cleverly and work with our technical colleagues, we can of course make the car very aerodynamic. And as I say, that's one of the key values of Lotus is aerodynamics. And of course aerodynamics is also a great visual tool as well. It's a very obvious thing that you see on the design of the vehicle. So probably then to talk through the car and how those facets affect things and some of the key features. First of all, if we're thinking about aerodynamics, I think one of the first things you see on the car is just how open certain areas are on the front of the vehicle. Normally you'd have radiators in there, but these are completely open through there. So your eye is drawn from here right past the wheel where the exit is behind the wheel. So this is all part of an aerodynamic philosophy. The aerodynamics guys call it porosity or transparency. We said it was rather like the car is being carved by air, rather like you see in nature where maybe a glacier or water erodes a surface. For us as designers, it's interesting because it produces some interesting shapes, and shapes that draw your eye through the car, create a lot of visual speed. Technically, what's interesting about it is you're reducing the blockage to the air, which reduces drag. You're allowing air to move fast through the car, fast air, low pressure, so you reduce drag, and also you can use it to contribute to downforce in certain ways as well. So it's a great balance between the aesthetic and the technical, and that's something which has always been very important to Lotus. If you look at our racing cars, the 1950s, 60s and 70s, they're all these very beautiful vehicles, but very technically excellent, groundbreaking in many respects. So that's one of the start points here, and of course you can also see some beautiful carbon fibre work here and very intricate aerodynamics in terms of the multi-plane front splitter here. So very functional, very beautiful. And the more you look in this car, the more you see there's sort of layers within layers, which is a sort of very intriguing thing to see. You can also see here that the hood on the car, the bonnet as we would call it in the UK, sort of floats over the main surface, and there's actually a gap through here. So once again, that's an aerodynamic feature, but it's also something which is very beautiful to look at. This helps smooth the airflow over the cabin. It's not all about aerodynamics at the front, though. It's about details and technology. So we've got a really beautiful badge on the front, carbon fibre with inlaid metal. So a customer can specify that in different finishes. So it could be something very functional like titanium, very lightweight, or it could be something which is very rich and exotic like gold or platinum, etc. Headlights here, very familiar to a lot of people. Lotus having these slim lights, but inside we've got these very elegant wing details, and all over the car you'll see reference to aviation. The reason behind that is aircraft are always very beautiful and functional shapes. They're all about carving through the air with minimum drag, the same as this car. So we've got these wing shapes and the flipped tip, rather like you see on a modern airliner. And behind that, the technology is all laser, so it's all the most modern technology. So very lightweight, very compact, very efficient in terms of the effectiveness of the light. As we stand back a bit, probably the most important thing you see on any car when you first see it is just the proportions. And what you can see here is a car that sits very wide, it's about 2 metres wide, very low, 1123 millimetres, so typical for this sort of car, a hypercar. But the cabin sitting hunkered down between the wheels. That has very obvious references to sports prototypes and other racing cars of that sort of ilk. But it also makes the car look like it's got a low centre of gravity. It makes the car look as though it's going to be dynamic and agile to drive. It also then, with the cabin being so low, it also helps punch out these haunches on the car, front and rear. And there's something which has been common to a lot of Lotuses over the years. In our current range, you'll see something similar on the Elise, on the Exige, and on the Evora. And then if you go all the way back to the 1950s and 1960s, and you look at things like the Type 11, the Type 30, Type 40, you'll see something very similar. A great visual message, links the car to a racing car, makes the car look muscular, makes the car look very planted on the road. And of course when you sit inside the car you see all this, so you're able to place the car on the road. Really important for us, a car that is for the drivers, that you can feel that the car's placed well. But also it's just a very emotional thing to see. You can see all the light dancing across the surface. Moving back, you can see this beautiful teardrop cabin, very aerodynamic. Again, a reference that you might see on sports racing prototypes and on some of our other vehicles as well. Very elegant front wheel, made from magnesium, very weight efficient. While we were designing the car, we deliberated over different types of materials, carbon, etc. And from a technical standpoint, our engineering colleagues, magnesium, most weight effective in terms of strength, and of course this car doing well over 200 miles an hour, creating a huge amount of downforce, huge cornering forces. Is going to put an awful lot of stresses through the wheel, so it's really important. It's light, but it's also a strong wheel. As I get to this part of the car, we start seeing some really interesting aerodynamic features. The whole rear of the tyre is exposed, so if you're like me, you're going to enjoy just seeing the width of the tyre through there, but that's there for good technical reason. It allows all that air that has travelled through the wheel arch cavity to be exhausted, helps reduce drag, also takes all the pressure out of the wheel arch, which helps reduce lift on the car as well. And obviously that's really important in high performance car. You'll probably see a small shut line around here, and that's where the camera deploys. We don't have mirrors on this car at all. We have cameras with screens inside. So when you key on, this deploys. It's very science fiction, and obviously it's the coming trend. It's just becoming legal in markets around the world. So we're right on the cutting edge of technology. This part of the car is very nice sculpturally. You can see this beautiful positive curve moving into a negative, and the crisp line running around the car. And this soft section and hard line is one of the sort of surface philosophies that we've had while designing the car. And you can probably see the inspiration from various military aircraft over the years that we've drawn on for this. Just a very elegant combination of things, quite timeless, looks very dynamic as well. Small detail here, very nice. We've got the Union flag there, again made out of whatever metals the customer wants. So it could be titanium or precious metals as well. But of course the customer can specify something personal to them in there as well. So bespoking on this car is very much a key thing. And I think when we get to this part of the car, you know, it really starts coming alive, and you start building towards the big story at the back of the car, which we're going to look at in a second. A little bit like any great movie, it starts with a certain pace, has a few twists and turns, a bit of intrigue, and then it builds to the climax at the end of the movie. The rear of the car here really is the big shot, is the real new aspect of the vehicle. And what feeds that big story is this piece of sculpture here. So what you're looking at here is not a traditional intake with a radiator in here. This is just a sculpted tube, a sculpted duct. And once again, this is very much an aerodynamic feature that we blended into the sculpture of the car. We're not the first people to do things like this, but I think we're the first to do it in such a sculptural manner. So aesthetically, your eye is drawn through this, you're intrigued by what you're seeing. As you walk around the car, you don't notice it first of all, and then you realise it's there and it's something very intriguing. Technically what it allows to do is you're minimising the blockage to the air, you're allowing air to pass through here, as we described earlier, keeping high speed, low pressure, reducing drag, and then as the air exits at the back as well, it helps pull the efficiency of the diffuser as well, the under tray that runs on the car. So it helps contribute to downforce as well. But we know this is an intriguing piece of sculpture, so we put small light inside each of the tunnels, so when you park the car up you can illuminate them, so a bit of theatre for the car. And one journalist very kindly said it looked like a piece of late 20th century sculpture, a bit like Henry Moore or maybe Barbara Hepworth or somebody like that. I wish we had the intellect and culture to have thought of that first, but it was a very nice compliment anyway. So very beautiful surfaces here, and you can see all over the car the reference to the structure of the vehicle, so you can see carbon fibre here. So it's very important to say completely new underpinnings on this car, carbon fibre tub, carbon fibre panels, so very weight efficient, with 1680 kilos as we know it at the moment, which is very weight efficient for this type of vehicle. And where I'm standing at the moment, inside here is where the battery pack is. So unlike modern saloon cars, which are putting battery packs into them, they tend to put them underneath here for packaging reasons. As a sports car, we thought the best solution was in the centre of the car, rather like any modern racing car.
Keeping the mass in the centre, controlling the polar moment of inertia means the car remains very agile. From our standpoint, it allows us to keep the car low as well, minimise the cross-section area, minimise drag, and of course just create a very dramatic look. The car looks as though it's painted to the road all the time. So we'll move to the back of the car. Okay, so here we are at the back of the car, and I said this was the big story. First off, the car's just got fantastic proportions from this view. Broad shoulders, the cabin hunkered down. You can tell the car is a performance car and it's going to be fun to drive as well. But as I say, there is a big story here, and you can really see something very unique in the way these 3/4 Venturis exit the car at the rear here, giving it a completely unique look. And just to reinforce that, we've got these very unusual lights, like little ribbons of light that go around the exit of these 3/4 Venturi ducts. Almost look a little bit like reheat on the back of a jet fighter as well when they're illuminated. So when we were designing the car, there was an inspiration moment where one of the designers came up with a sketch for this, and we all got very excited about it. But so often the case is you're thwarted by technical constraints, cost, legalities, etc. So we were excited, but we just didn't think we were going to be able to make this happen. But as it turns out, we have. So within these light units, we've got the main rear lights, we've got the brake stop light, and we've got the direction indicator. The lighting story doesn't just stop there, though. You can see the Lotus letters are illuminated. We did this before we changed our corporate identity, so that we are a new font on the production cars. The T in the centre is actually the reverse light, so a nice little trick that's been played there to conceal it. Again, something when we suggested it, we didn't think really it was going to be possible to make it legally, but as it turns out, we have made it work, so something very nice. Elsewhere on the back of the car, obviously an awful lot of aerodynamic work going on here. We've got the exits, as I said, from the 3/4 Venturis, these elements that help reduce drag. As I say, as the air exit, it helps pull the air out from the diffuser as well, which is creating downforce in the car. Diffuser, very beautiful carbon fibre piece here, as you can see. Not developed purely on style, as you probably appreciate. Thousands of hours of CFD work has been done to hone this. And in the centre of the diffuser, we've got DRS flaps, so they can be either deployed one way or the other, depending if you want to get maximum top speed, but without so much downforce, or you want to create downforce for cornering speed. And obviously, this type of car, you're going to want both of those elements. You're going to want to be able to go around corners quickly, but you're also going to want to be able to go quick in a straight line. In terms of active aerodynamics, actually on this car, there's relatively little. There's the DRS flaps, and then we've got the wing on top here, which deploys at speed and then tilts. Deliberate ploy for Lotus. Lotus is all about weight efficiency. Every moving part you put on there is obviously going to contribute to weight. And also just in terms of intellectually, it's a much more elegant solution if you can do more things passively. So that was the reason behind that, very efficient way of doing it, and it turns out we didn't need it. We're waiting for the day where we can actually give the full aerodynamic performance on this car, because in terms of CFD results, this car is absolutely extraordinary in terms of the amount of downforce it generates, but we're keeping our powder dry on that one at the moment. Another important thing when you're at the rear of the car really is your connection with this being a machine, a piece of automotive art, is what you see through the glazing at the back. Obviously, we don't have a traditional gasoline engine, internal combustion engine. We've got the battery pack there. So we designed it to make the battery pack look attractive, look intriguing, push some of the same buttons that excite people who are petrol heads when they look at V12 or V8 or 6-cylinder or whatever it might be. But also through here you can see all the beautiful suspension inside there inboard, very sort of dramatic anodized colours. So if you're like me and you like the fantastic blend between
the technical and the artistic on cars, or on motorcycles as well. It's very much the same. You get a little flavour of that there when you look through. You see this mixture of something very designed but also very technical. And we've worked with some partners who are world leaders in terms of developing suspension components as well. So this really is going to be top drawer in terms of the performance that gives to the car as well. So I think that's pretty much the exterior. Other than to say, one thing I forgot, we've got the charge flap at the back, remembering this is an EV car. But we maybe take a look at the interior. Okay, so here we are with the interior of the car. I guess it's important to explain the journey to get to the interior. So we have these amazing doors, I guess quite common on a lot of supercars, but electrically powered. So your entry into the vehicle is very elegant, very dramatic. And then before you get to the interior, the bit a lot of people probably don't normally see is all the design work that goes into the areas we call the grey zone, the bit between the exterior and the interior. So where all the seals sit and where all the bodywork is here. So the two designers who worked on this car, Anthony Bushell and Barney Hatt, exterior and interior designer, spent hours being very fastidious on these, driving everyone to distraction. Me working with them as well, driving people to distraction to get all the surfaces looking very clean and correct. But it's really important, you know, as you approach the car, this looks all perfect as well. As you approach the car, probably the most dramatic thing you see is you have a sense of this porosity, transparency we talked about on the exterior when you look at the instrument panel. Unlike a conventional car, the instrument panel isn't a solid surface, it's actually a beam that goes across the car and is completely open through here. And the reason behind that is we wanted to create something very dramatic to look at, something which created a sense of space inside the car, allowed light into the vehicle, because a lot of these super hypercars are very dark environments, and this allows the light to cascade through there. But also we like the idea of the messaging behind it. This is a sort of wing-shaped beam made of carbon fibre, and of course you can immediately see references to aviation, which we said was very important in the exterior, but also from motorsport when you see wishbones and various components on motorsport cars that have that wing section. As a Lotus, very important philosophically as well, because this part does a couple of jobs. It carries all the ducting to the vents, and it's also the structure that holds up the steering column. So one part doing two jobs was very much a philosophy of our founder Colin Chapman, to save weight inside the car. Elsewhere, the theme of the interior is quite minimal, but it doesn't feel raw or race car like, and that's because we've been very careful to design the surfaces in a very sculptural way and also mix the materials. So you'll see on this show car here, which people can actually specify as a production car, we've got the carbon fibre of the tub, you've got the soft trim here, very thick pads on here, in this case nubuck and leather. You've got some beautiful machined metal parts, custom, you can specify those in aluminium or titanium and various different anodized finishes as well. And then you've got some of the very elegant gloss surfaces in. So this juxtaposition of different materials gives the car richness, as we would say, and stops it becoming, you know, like a raw racing car inside. But at the same time, very calm, very elegant, very minimal in its design. For a Lotus, though, the heart of the car really is all about the driver. We are for the drivers. And so the positioning of the seat, the design of the seat, the positioning of the steering column, and the instruments and all the secondary controls is really, really important. So we have a very strong team of ergonomics guys here, packaging engineers, who work with us at the start laying this out. And then the icing on the cake is Gavin Kershaw, is our lead attributes guy. He's also a championship winning racing driver as well, and he's driven not only racing cars but all the top supercars and hypercars in the world. So he was able to give us lots of guidance on what works, what's exciting to use and what's different, etc. So going back to the whole ergonomics of the interior, the seat, as I say, is a mixture of lightweightness but also comfort. So a very elegant carbon fibre shell and then these thick soft pads.
in a way a little bit like an Eames chair is, where you have this formed plywood structure and then thick leather on top. In front of the driver you've got a multi-function steering wheel, and you've got a call button there to use voice control, and then in front of the driver you've got one single screen. So we had a big debate, should we have a central screen on this car? One thing is, it's not really practical because of the space, but also a car that's going to be extreme high performance, well over 200 miles an hour. You don't really want the driver being distracted by using a touch screen or looking elsewhere in the cabin. Should be looking down the road or looking at the instruments in front of them and their hands on the wheel as much of the time as possible. So, as I say, voice control button there. If the driver doesn't need any other controls, they're either on the steering wheel, and you can see a very motorsport layout there, or they're on this central ski slope design, again very open, lightweight looking. But to help with these buttons in the centre, we've sculpted the surface, hexagonal pattern with little dimples in it. That means that when you reach across with your hand, you can feel where the switches are. So very intuitive, very ergonomic to use. And when you touch the switch, you get a haptic feedback, rather like you do on a phone. So very easy to use, basically. Through the screen in front of the driver, which is basically state-of-the-art screen, I think we're the second people to use that screen. You've got all your driving functions, so obviously speed and range, etc. You've got your navigation, your telephone, and of course your entertainment, and you interact with that through a control wheel, an MMI. So again, you don't have to take your eyes off the road to operate it. So very much based on thinking out how the driver's going to use this in speed. But as I say, if you have the opportunity to sit inside this car, you know, you'll feel like you're wearing the car. Everything is laid out perfectly. You feel as though you're sitting inside the car, so you feel part of the car. You can see the corners, very important if you're going to take it on the track and place it. So, as I say, very much feeling a part with the car, a part of the car, which is really important if you want to get the most out of the driving experience. Of course, one of the things which is very different inside this car is we have the screens for rear view. So we've got one on each door, and then we've got one in the centre. So the ones on the door are fed by the cameras we showed on the exterior, which pop out from the door. And then in the centre of the car, we've got the normal rear view feed cam. So something very fresh. We're not the first to do it, but we're certainly at the cutting edge of doing that. So it gives a very different feel to it. But as a whole, the car really does connect. This whole sense of porosity on the exterior for aerodynamics, porosity, openness, lightness inside the car. It's very much all one theme that ties together very strongly. So that's the Evija. I hope you enjoyed the little tour we've just done with the car and a little bit of the backstory. Keep yourself safe and sound, and speak to you soon.